Okay, I think we'll make a start. Good afternoon, everyone, and a really warm welcome to today's Birth Parent Conference. My name is Emma Crowther-Duncan, and I'm the North Adult Services Regional Manager here at PAC-UK. We're really thrilled to have you here as we focus on an incredibly important topic today, which is birth family perspectives on maintaining sibling relationships. The families that you'll hear from today have been working incredibly hard since around June, dedicating their time and energy to shaping today's themes and deciding how best to share those experiences with you. What you're about to hear is not only carefully considered, but very personal. So we ask that you approach this space with mindfulness and respect for the lived experiences and stories that are being shared today. The chat function will be open and this will be monitored by my colleague today, Mike Hancock. There won't be any Q&A as such, but please do use this function to share observations, comments and praise for our speakers today, as they will have full access to this after the event. And we often get some really good learning points and takeaways from your comments, so please do use this today. It's now my pleasure to introduce our host for today, Angela Fraser-Wicks. Angela has been a tireless advocate for birth families and we're absolutely honoured to have her here today. So over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's event. As Emma said, I'm Angela Fraser-Wicks. I am Chair of Trustees at Family Rights Group. I'm also founding member of their Parents Panel, and that's one of the expert panels made up of people with lived experience of the child welfare and family justice system. I'm also a birth mum or a first mum. You will hear throughout today people choose to use different words, and that's absolutely fine. That's their choice. I lost my eldest two children to adoption back in 2004, predominantly due to domestic abuse and mental health problems. I'm now happily married with a 13-year-old daughter who's had no local authority involvement whatsoever. And in December 2020, I was reconnected with my eldest son. I will share parts of my story at various different points throughout today's session. I'm absolutely delighted to be your host today and to be joined by friends and colleagues who will be presenting alongside me. Some have lived experience of adoption and others work in the field. And all of them, however, will be sharing their perspectives on the importance of maintaining relationships post-adoption with a particular focus on sibling relationships. And the reason for this focus is that often siblings are forgotten when it comes to making plans and can be overlooked when it comes to contact post-adoption. And sibling relationships are often the longest and closest relationships we have in our lives. They provide companionship, support, love, and stability. And sadly, adoption often breaks the bonds needed to form these close relationships or destroys any existing bonds and in turn those relationships. The long-term psychological impact can be catastrophic, often leaving children feeling unloved, unwanted, unseen and unheard. We hope that by sharing our experiences today, people involved both in the adoption system and in fact in all systems that come into contact with children and young people be able to get a clearer picture of why this needs to change and of the life-changing positive impact strengthening and maintaining these relationships has for everyone involved. Before we hear from others about their experiences, I would just like to share a little bit of mine. When I first lost my children, as for everybody else who's been through this, I was distraught and devastated. I had no idea how I was going to carry on without them. I was completely alone, isolated, and incredibly vulnerable. The very last words I said to my eldest son were that I would write very soon. We had been promised letterbox, and it was genuinely the only thing keeping me going. Sadly for me, I wasn't told at the time that letterbox would be at the discretion of the adopters or that it could take a very long time to arrange. And finding this out after saying goodbye almost destroyed me. I felt like I'd failed my son by not keeping that promise. I begged that somebody tell him that I was okay and that I would write very soon. But sadly, I was no longer his mum. I had no right to tell him anything. In fact, I almost gave up completely. It was only the fact that I was able to access support, which enabled me to secure letterbox, that in turn helped me to turn my life around and begin to move forwards. I was able to show my children that I wasn't the person that the local authority may have said I was, that I wasn't a failure, I went on to fight for change, to speak out, in a hope of bringing about change for others. I knew I couldn't change things for myself. I wrote all about my work in my letterbox letters to my boys, and I hope that one day they may be proud of their mum. Then, years later, when my daughter was born, via letterbox, I was able to introduce them to their little sister. And as she grew, we often spoke about her big brothers, who by this point lived in Australia. And in our local town, there's a large brass sculpture of a globe. And every time we walked past, my daughter would run over to it. She would stop and she would point to Australia and she would say, "That's where my brothers live." Sadly, for me, letterbox broke down when my son became a teenager, and we were all at this point unsupported. I made the decision to give my son my blessing to let go, that to just go and live a happy life and to stop writing if that's what he needed to do for his own mental well-being. I obviously hoped one day he would change his mind. I then had to support my little girl as best I could when she would ask why her brothers didn't want her, and try to explain that it was me that they didn't want and that none of this was her fault. I told her that people who didn't know us had made decisions that impacted us, that we had no control over. And I showed her, hopefully, that I was working to try and change that and that I wouldn't give up on change. We would still walk past the globe and she would still point, but it was always tainted at this point with sadness, as we never knew when we would ever hear from her brothers again. And then in December 2020, I received an email out of the blue saying that my son wanted to contact me. And 48 hours later, we connected via video call. It was a magical moment, just seeing his happy, smiling face again, hearing him call me mum. But there was sadness too, because during that call, I was devastated to find out that he'd been trying to contact me for years, but that the local authority had refused to help him. They had mistakenly told him that I was a safeguarding risk to his younger brother. They offered him no support to deal with this, no explanation of what the risk may be, or to tell him of any next steps. They simply told him no and left him to deal with the consequences alone. Only luckily for him and for me, his adoptive mum wasn't prepared to leave him to fight alone. She saw his need to connect and selflessly helped him find me online. And thanks to all my work with the Family Rights Group, they were able to find me and read all about me. This enabled them to prove to the local authority that I wasn't a risk and that they had no reason to refuse to connect us. And thankfully for all of us, this time they listened to him. And then finally, my daughter got to meet her biggest brother. She was 9 years old. It was a magical moment, and I tried very hard not to focus on the fact that she had lost so many years with him and to just be happy for what we had in that moment. As my son and his family live in Australia, all contact needed to be by video call. And whilst this was wonderful and it was amazing to be able to see and talk to him, we were always counting down the time to when we may actually be able to see each other in person. Video calls weren't easy for my daughter. She struggled to have a proper conversation. And in the end, we found it was easier for them to connect via online gaming so that they could actually build something of a relationship. And I desperately wanted them to be able to meet each other in person so that they could have the chance to build a relationship, a proper relationship. And if we could put up the slide, please. And last Tuesday, my daughter got that chance. My son and his wife came to the UK, and we were finally able to be together again. 20 years, 3 months, and 14 days after we were made to say goodbye, I was able to hold my son and say hello again. My daughter finally got to meet her biggest brother. We were able to spend 4 amazing days together, making memories that will last us all a lifetime. We were able to take him and show him the globe. The photograph shows him pointing to the UK and his sister pointing to Australia. He got to push her on the swings, play Uno, and just have some real quality time with her. We were even able to have a slightly belated birthday party for her, and my son joined me and family to sing happy birthday and watch her blow out her candles. It's hard to put into words what these moments meant to me and how much I will treasure them. As well as making new memories, my son and I were able to talk about our experiences of adoption and how it impacted us. As adults, we were able to identify the failings that had impacted us and both be mature enough to be able to accept them, move forward, and not allow them to continue to impact us negatively. Things were not quite so easy or straightforward for my daughter, yet she's handled the whole thing amazingly. She is an incredible person and has never once let any of this impact her attitude or her behaviour. She has accepted that she had no control, no choice, and no rights whatsoever. She has had to deal with situations and emotions way beyond her years, and I can't put into words how proud I am of her. When I finally asked the local authority for an explanation as to why they refused to connect myself and my son, as I knew they had all of the information about me on file and they knew I was not a risk, they told me that letterbox and reunification were two different departments, and they had not shared information. I try not to think about how different things could have been for her if the local authority had understood that post-adoption contact isn't simply admin. It is maintaining and building relationships. Getting it right changes lives in so many wonderful ways. And getting it wrong can devastate them. As I'm sure you can imagine, and you can probably hear in my voice, this is all quite raw and quite real, and I'm going to do my absolute best to get through the rest of the day. And I'm going to be able to do that because I'm supported by everybody else who is here on this call, whether our experiences are similar or not. And one of those amazing people who's been an immense source of support will be our next speaker. I'm going to ask Jill to introduce herself and introduce this next section. And as I do so, I'd also like to thank her for being such a support for me throughout this. Jill, it's over to you.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks very much indeed for your kind words. I lost my son to adoption in 1968. I later met and married my husband, Richard, and had two more children, Simon and Anna, both now in their 40s. Simon is a retail manager, Anna is a physiotherapist. My adopted son, Ian, now in his 50s, is an advanced mental health coach and wellbeing specialist. I didn't tell Anna and Simon they had a long-lost brother until they were in their teens, as I think I didn't want to worry them until they were older. Because with so-called historical adoptions, we had to sign legal documents to the effect that we would never, ever be able to have any further contact for the rest of our lives. So Ian grew up in his adoptive family, not even knowing he had any siblings. Everything back in the day was shrouded in secrecy. But with a change in adoption law, much later, it became possible for adopted people to trace their birth parents. So Ian searched for and found me 30 years ago, and we've been happily reunited ever since. So here, Simon, Anna, and Ian give their testimonies as to their sibling relationships. So over to them.
My mum first told me about Ian when I was about 14 years old, and at that age I didn't really give it huge amounts of thought. It wasn't till I turned 16 and had my first serious boyfriend that it really hit home to me what she'd actually been through at the same age as me. It was a couple of years later, as I was about to turn 18 and about to start university, actually, when the letter came through the post. And at that stage, I was just so unbelievably excited for my mum, because she'd spent 27 years having to suppress all the trauma and emotion of giving him up all those years before. I was just thrilled for her and what it meant that finally, after all these years, she'd be able to meet him. It was a short while after that, I guess, that I then started to kind of think, golly, I've got a brother. Like, what does this mean to me? And all these questions came flooding into my mind. Like, you know, is he a nice person? Is he going to like me? What does he look like? Because of the distance with him living in New Zealand, the first year we did spend writing letters to each other, the odd phone call, just getting to know each other. And after about a year, he flew over to meet us. And I vividly remember that day. It was a hot summer's day. Me and my other brother Simon were sat excitedly but a little bit apprehensively in the garden waiting for him to turn up. But as soon as he arrived, I just remember seeing him walking towards us, and I just didn't hesitate. I gave him the hugest hug, and it was the most amazing feeling. this stranger who I'd never met before, I was giving this big hug to, and it just felt so natural, and there was just this energy and just instant connection between all three of us. We spent the afternoon comparing body parts and our funny flat feet and our eyes, and just all the similarities, not just physically but just in terms of what kind of people we are. That summer was lovely. We kind of regressed into being little kids where we pretended to, fight with each other. And it was like we were reliving kind of what we'd missed out on growing up with each other, but it was truly special. Without doubt, the bond between a mother and her baby is, one of the strongest there is. But having met Ian has just proved to me that actually, under many circumstances, the sibling bond can be equally strong, even when you've not been brought up with each other. And it really shouldn't be underestimated in any way at all. We've had 30 years now together. We visit each other when we can, we FaceTime. What I love about having met Ian is it's not just about him and me anymore. We've each got partners, we've got daughters. Our daughters are now forming close relationships with each other and planning trips across the oceans to see each other. I feel a deep emotional and spiritual connection to Ian, and I feel truly blessed to have had him part of my life and to have the future together.
I first knew that I had an older brother when I was 16, when my mum told me and my younger sister that when she was 16 she had a baby and she was forced to have him adopted. I think to start with, we were really curious about where he was, what he was doing, but we didn't really dwell on it too much. I think at that point we didn't know if there was ever a possibility that we would ever see him, and it just, it wasn't something that we dwelled on too much. I think it wasn't probably until a few years later when Ian established contact with my mum and with the family that we really kind of fully comprehended the whole situation and kind of what it meant to us, and especially to mum and Ian as well. At that point, it was just something that was really positive. We were really supportive of my mum. We wanted to know what happened. We wanted to understand how she was feeling, and it was a huge thing for the family when Ian made contact with mum. I would like to just say it's been, from my point of view, nothing but a positive experience. But living through it with my mum and with Ian, I'm fully aware that it's not been all so easy. There's some real positives with the reuniting with a birth mother and a birth child, but it's not an easy journey, and we're fully aware of that. But from my point of view, it's been absolutely fantastic. I remember the very first time meeting Ian, just feeling overwhelmed with actually how similar we were. And I think at the time it was a big shock to realise that we were very, very similar. Looking back now, it just sort of kind of feels natural, but at the time, thinking that it was just unbelievable. I remember comparing our feet. Physically, we were quite similar, and we have the same awful feet. But just kind of ideologically and just our outlook on life was very similar back then. Fast forward, over 30 years, and I think the bonds and the similarities that we share has only just grown and developed even more. We don't see each other that often. We haven't seen each other too many times over the last 30 years, and we're both as bad as each other. We don't really speak to each other as often as we could or should maybe. But I think the similarities have only increased over the years. We are just so similar. I sometimes think that Ian's probably the one person in the whole world that is the most similar to me, which is pretty amazing if you consider that we kind of never knew each other for most of our lives, or the sort of when we grew up, and the fact that we've not seen each other that many times. But we both trained to be teachers. We both are obsessed with our gardens and gardening. It's our greatest passion. We both have a really keen interest in wildlife, in protecting wildlife. We've both volunteered in that field as well. We're both very artistic. We love photography. And politically, we're really, really similar as well. I think Ian's the one person when I am in his company that I can absolutely vent my unfiltered political views without worrying what he's going to think. So yeah, I think the whole thing's been absolutely wonderful, really, really positive, and yeah, it continues to be that way.
So as an adoptee, I think the issue of brothers and sisters is a huge one and often overlooked or undervalued. Certainly prior to my reunion, growing up in my adoptive family, there were some fairly massive issues around my brother and my identity. And for all people, their siblings, the people who look like them, who act, in similar ways with similar character, forms a huge part of anybody's identity, let alone their connections and attachments and feelings of belonging within that family unit. And so just having brothers and sisters is a massive part of anybody's life and forms a huge part of their identity. I think growing up, before my reunion with Jill, I was often comparing myself with my friends and seeing the relationship that my friends had with their brothers and sisters really reinforced the differences within my own family and the feelings of disconnection and struggling to come to terms with my identity and who I was as a person. But look, when I first met Simon and Anna, I had never really even recognised or fully considered the implications of them in relation to myself and how that all worked. There was this immense feeling of attachment and closeness with my reunion with Jill, but it was actually the brother-sister bond with Simon and Anna that provided really this something completely new feeling of family as opposed to child. And for the first time I had people in my life of a similar age that I could relate to and with whom our relationship is of an equal attachment. I think too, thinking about on my birth father's side, the lack of information that I had meant that I've only just recently found them. And I think from them, they've only, recently only even learnt of my existence at all. And so I think there's plenty of work to do there for brothers and sisters. I can remember, those early, the first meeting of all my brothers and sisters, and the immense joy and sense of attachment, but also on reflection too, overwhelming feelings of loss and separation, of what could have been, or maybe even should have been, but wasn't. And so there are these huge gaps and voids, and I just don't think that they are often considered fully. And I think too, my reunion with Jill, it's now 30 years past that reunion. But in more recent times, and just in the last 2 or 3 years, finding my brothers and sister on my father's side has really brought that more clearly back into focus. The impacts on them to suddenly learn of my existence and to begin coming to terms with all of that. So I think that's a huge issue. But I think, over and above all the other issues involved in a reunion between an adoptee and between their parents and the adoptive parents, these other additional issues around brothers and sisters would really benefit from close and specialist attention and care. that we provide best practice, holistic approaches to the wider issues surrounding adoption.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Jill. And I think it's very clear to say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Your children are a fantastic testament to the work that you've done supporting them through this and enabling them to build that bond. And for me, obviously, it's so hard when you hear somebody else's story not to make the comparisons and not to see the similarities. And, you know, just the way they were talking about how they were delighted to realize that they looked like each other and their mannerisms. And a lot of people who were around me and my son were really sort of taken aback by just how similar we are, despite all those years of being apart. And my daughter finally got to see why I've spent pretty much her entire life telling her, you are the double of your brother and you are like your brother. But I think for me, what I took from that, and I hope that I've shared with my children, is their outlook on all of this. There was no negativity in there. There was no bitterness. There was no anger. It was just love and happiness and making the most of the relationships that they have. So I think you should be, and I know you are, incredibly proud of all of your children.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, as you say, it's not just the emotional issues. That's a huge part, but the physical as well. So important for siblings, I think, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you. And please do pass on our thanks to them, because I think it just brings such a richness to this that I just don't think we would have been able to convey without their voices included. So thank you to you all. It's hugely appreciated. And I'm next going to introduce Christy, and she's going to share a little bit about her experiences. In particular, the impact the lack of understanding within the education system can have on our children. For example, in my case, my daughter's school refused to authorise the time off for my daughter to reconnect with her brother, which not only caused a lot of unnecessary stress at a time when I had quite enough going on, and a lot of worry, but it also sadly showed a real lack of understanding of the need to support my daughter through this and to make this process as easy for her to navigate as possible. It felt like it was another stumbling block that was put in our way. And Christy, you can do a better job of introducing yourself than I can. So do you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your son's experiences?
Yeah, thanks, Angela. So I'm Christy. I'm Christy. I'm a birth mum of two who were free for adoption in 2006. I am also mum to an 18-year-old who has been brought up with no intervention from the local authorities. I will be referring to my son as Kay throughout this presentation, and everything I will be discussing today will be mine and my son's experiences and views only. 2 years ago, myself and my son took part in National Adoption Week, and we talked about the memories Kay had, knowing he had two sisters who were free for adoption 8 months before he was born. He remembered me telling him a story about when he was 16, he would be able to meet his older sisters, and he talked about how he never understood why they went and why he got to stay, considering it was all the same situation. Today, I would like to talk about how adoption impacted Kay's life as a birth sibling and what needs to change in professions who work with children from all backgrounds. Next slide, please. So these are just a few of my memories of what I remember. Starting off from the earliest was infant school. It was a new school, we'd gone in and they'd met Kay, and I had to explain myself to them and what had happened, and that Kay knew about his sisters. He was very vocal at that age. He loved to tell people that he had two sisters. I remember Christmas thinking that he would be in school and he's going to make me a card, and him running out at school gates saying, Mummy, I've made this for my sisters. And it was a lovely Christmas card. Something that I didn't expect, but his teachers had sat with him. He'd said that he didn't want to do one for Mummy, he wanted to do one for his sisters, and the teachers sat with him and helped him do that. That was massive for me. It was a lovely moment. When he went up to junior school, things started to change. There was teachers were just not understanding what Kay's thoughts and feelings were, being conscious of having two sisters and teachers not validating what he was expressing. So Kay had a lot of friends who had siblings, brothers, sisters, and he was very happy again to tell people that he had two sisters, even though they didn't live with him. He had two sisters. This kind of turned really awful for him, really. Bullying started. The fact of that nobody had ever seen these sisters, and it just seemed to be all an imaginary thing for Kay. And unfortunately, it turned physical. He was really bullied. He was attacked as well. This brought down his confidence, his self-esteem. He struggled to make friends and have them kind of relationships. When I brought this up in schools and I talked about adoption from a birth parent's perspective, there was no understanding. There was no talk about it, no questions asked kind of thing. It was just like nothing was validated of what we were saying and what Kay's emotions needed. Having to explain myself as mum to Kay and birth mum to other children and professionals, thinking that I was an adopter, Kay was an adopter, was adopted, and that Kay had other sisters that were adopted. That wasn't right. And then you try and tell them and explain yourself, and they still go back to, so you're an adopter. Just no understanding at all. I remember Kay being a teenager and having to explain to him we don't know and if when we were going to have contact, even though I'd told him when he was 16 he'd be able to have this contact. That was most probably a mistake by me, not realising that at 16 it wasn't going to happen. At this point, though, I'd started getting support. So I'd gone 16 years without any support, and I found PAC-UK. And if it wasn't for me getting that support, I don't think I'd been able to help Caden with his emotions as a teenager as well as I did. Between the ages of 16 and 18, Kay needed support with a few issues. I spoke with his college, safeguarding team, and a local children's services team for support. Again, I experienced a lack of understanding. Nothing was validated of what Kay needed. Next slide, please. So these are some of Kay's memories. He remembered in his younger years his friends having brothers and sisters. He felt very lonely, that everybody had brothers and sisters, and he knew that he had them, but his weren't about, and he just couldn't understand it. He can't remember any teachers ever asking about his siblings, so what his thoughts or feelings were. He remembers telling his friends that he gets to see his sisters when he was 16, and the bullying starting and affecting his self-esteem and confidence. He feels like this played a massive part in him not being able to have many friends because he felt misunderstood and that he'd be bullied. In high school, he chose not to talk about his siblings after everything that he'd been through at junior school. It was just easier for him to be quiet. He remembers me at 15 years old explaining we don't know when we will see the girls again, and explaining a little bit about adoption. 16 years old, mixed feelings of sadness and anger, you know, that transition of, you know, going into adulthood as well. Not understanding why his sisters and why not him. It's the when, the where, the how, wondering if and when, how he would ever see them. And curiosity of what life would have been like if they were here. Next slide, please. What we needed Kay's thoughts and feelings validated by all professionals. We needed emotional support, understanding, and no judgment. We needed guidance. Well, I needed guidance to, I suppose, be able to create this path for Caden of understanding for him. But without this me getting support, I couldn't provide my son with that support either. It wasn't just in education, you know, scenes like I came across all this, GPs, counsellors that were away from adoption kind of thing, that dealt with trauma and things. There was just no understanding on the impact of adoption for a birth family, and it was treated as a loss, and the trauma of it wasn't acknowledged as it should have been. There was a lot of failings by the local authority with letterbox contacts that needed addressed and rectified. All contact was cut with no explanation. I was the only person to have contact through letterbox, but this was stopped 4 years in with no explanation at all. Next slide, please. What do we need to change? Perceptions of birth families. Most of us will go through a bad situation, but this does not mean that we stay in that same situation forever. And we find that a lot of perceptions are, well, you must have done something really bad. For me, I was a victim of domestic violence. I needed support. We all needed support. I think that we need professionals to have a fuller understanding of adoption and its impact on birth families, teachers, counsellors, health professionals, child protection, local authorities. Better training for all professionals, how adoption affects health and well-being throughout a birth family's life. More research needs to be done on the impacts of birth family and how trauma manifests throughout life for all involved and the effects on the birth sibling. Support for these young children who cannot express their feelings of knowing they have siblings who are adopted. And reviews in contact between adopted children and birth siblings who have stayed with their family, letterbox, digital pictures, just these little things that we can think of that can make a massive difference. Next slide, please. So I'm going to finish on a short message from Care, and he really wanted to say this. To all professionals who work with families in crisis and care proceedings, please think about the decisions that you make and the impact that you will have on families and their lives forever. No child should ever have to go through what I did. Growing up with no answers, no support, no understanding and no validation apart from my mum made me feel like a failure, and my thoughts and feelings meant nothing. Why did I not matter? Why are families like mine demeaned? Even though I have never seen nor spoke to my sisters, I think about them every day. I wonder if I have ever walked past them in the street. I daydream of what it could have been like if they were here, and I dream that one day I will see them. I never had any access to contact. I wish I had something. I don't care if it was a letter, a picture, anything would have done. Please just put yourself in the other person's shoes and think how you would feel through life if this was you. I am only 18. Let's hope that this is not forever. Thank you for listening to my words from Care. And I'm going to leave that there. Thank you.
I don't know how I can possibly come in after that or follow that. Again, just thank you doesn't seem enough to Care for sharing that, for having the bravery and the courage to speak out so that people can learn from his experiences and hopefully stop other children from going through those feelings of loss and failure and all of that he internalized that wasn't his to carry, and that was placed there by people who didn't know him, had never met him, but had made decisions that massively impacted him. And again, for that, nothing that he said there came across as angry or bitter. It came across as kind and calm and just wanting to help other people to learn. So again, huge testament to your parenting to have helped him navigate this. I know all too well just how challenging and difficult it is, and just when we think we're starting to get a handle on everything and that we've got everything managed, another curveball comes along and we suddenly have to try and support them in their grief whilst managing our own and answering questions that we don't have the answers for. But as mum, we're expected to be able to fix everything, and when we can't, that's really difficult. And I think what also comes with this that I think a lot of people fail to understand is we already carry a huge amount of guilt. This just adds to that, and we end up feeling responsible for things that we desperately want to fix, that we desperately want to change. And I think one of the things that really came through in there was the emphasis around we all change. We're all very different people to what we were when we went through proceedings. We're all very different people to that we were a week ago. And the fact that the system just makes a decision and that decision is final and it's not revisited and there's no sort of thought put into place for what ifs and what happens when more children come along or when more children are already there, and actually that we really need to be doing better for these children who are the real unseen and unheard victims of adoption. And I'm incredibly grateful that we've had this opportunity to allow their voices to be heard and show them that actually we do care about them and we do value them, and we do want their perspectives to be shared with as many people as possible. So thank you to you, and a huge thank you to Kay. Absolutely amazing job, and we're incredibly proud of him and of you. So thank you, because I know talking about these things are not easy at all.
Thanks, Angela.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. And we're going to take a slight little detour now from what we've been talking about so far. And I'm guessing the audience is probably glad to have a little. We'll just breathe a little bit, and but instead of listening to more lived experience, we're going to now hear from Vicky Swift, and we're going to have a chat about things from a professional's perspective. And we have some sort of questions, but we're going to do this more of just a bit of a conversation rather than another presentation, just to break things up a little bit. Vicky, did you want to introduce yourself so you can do a better job than I can?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So my name's Vicky Swift, and I work with Adoption England, and we work on behalf of 33, nearly 34 regional adoption agencies in England, but we also link in with voluntary adoption agencies and lots of different stakeholders, PAC-UK, and I'm really feel really privileged to be here today to join absolutely amazing speakers we've had so far. So yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Vicky. I think, it's incredibly important to us and to everybody that we understand that if we're ever going to change the way things work, we all have to work together. There's no point in the families who are impacted being on one side of the discussion and the professionals who have an opportunity to impact that practice being on another. And I think so we're incredibly grateful to you for coming along, because I think it sends an incredibly important message that actually, it's sometimes conversations are very difficult to have, but that doesn't mean that we should avoid having them. And that actually, if we're going to change things, the best way to do is to look at what's not working, but more importantly, what is working, and see if we can spread that wider. So I think really we just wanted to have a bit of a chat and a discussion and what you see the role of professionals being in supporting these sibling relationships, and why you feel that it's really crucial for those relationships to be supported.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of what we've heard today, from yourself, from Christy, and from Jill's sons and daughter, it's clear that there is a real need to make sure that we think. And I think I wrote down what Jill's son said, Ian, who's here today, and he said, separation about what could have been that wasn't. And I think it's about us really listening to those voices and trying to change the way that practice is done throughout our systems. But I think in terms of what's really tricky in our work is that this isn't just one bit of the sector that needs to try to change the way that it works. It's a whole sector, from local authority practice to now we have regional adoption agencies, we have voluntary agencies, we have lots and lots of different people who work on this. And I think it all centers around that culture change, what we've been working on in terms of Adoption England, but also other individuals have been involved in that. And there's practical things that professionals can do rather than that whole sea change. Things that you mentioned before, Angela, about really keeping really clear records about brothers and sisters, being really clear about what those plans are. Professionals can start to support those adult relationships at whatever part that is in their journey. So that could be local authority children's social workers, it could be adoption social workers, independent individuals. It's about supporting the adult relationships around that so that it doesn't become a huge gap in children's lives and them not knowing each other. And in terms of a big thing for professionals is actually, well, what support do families need then? I know Christy and her son Kay alluded to that they didn't feel they had that support, whether it be from the GP or whether it be in education. And actually, what support do families need at that point? And the support is absolutely vital, because it's great for families like Jill's family that have managed to move that forward through their own, adult children relationships. But there's lots of families with different care arrangements. So it could be children who are adopted and they might have brothers and sisters, like Christy's example with birth family. It could be in kinship care, it could be in foster care. And that also equally goes towards not just the support, but the training that we provide for the different individuals coming forward, such as for adoption or for kinship or for fostering as well, that we really make sure that we elevate the voices of those children. And I know that I'll put it in the chat in a bit. There's Sheila Beckett has done the charter and has worked with lots and lots of children, and it's children want to know things like, why aren't they placed together with the brothers and sisters, and they want to know that they're okay and that they're happy. And that's such an important thing to them, for them to feel settled in the home that they live, might be with adoptive parents or with foster carers or with kinship carers. And these are the things that professionals can support with getting answers to, regardless of what stage the system is at for that child.
Absolutely. And I think for me as well, there's something in there about the understanding of risk and the need to keep reassessing that risk, and how, we often make decisions around contact very early on in the whole situation, and obviously things change and needs change, and what especially in my daughter's case, what she needed as a 5-year-old and what she needed as a 10-year-old and what she needed as a 13-year-old were markedly different. But everything was just the system seemed to focus very keenly on the needs of the child who was being adopted, and that unfortunately was at the expense of other children. And I think there's something in there about helping people to understand how to get that balance right between managing the needs of all the children, and obviously at all points making sure there isn't risk and making sure that we're doing things safely, but understanding that if you have a birth family who has a child living with them with no local authority involvement, that has to be an indication that the risk has dramatically decreased to have arrived at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and just to touch on risk as well, I think a lot of what we've been working on with the UEA and Beth Neal and the culture change is around actually clearly risk analysis, but not assuming risk is there. And also, let's think about the risk of not having this relationship, of not having these connections for children as they grow up, which we've heard really powerful examples actually of what that risk is today. And flipping that on its head, rather than assuming the risk, like you say, of what may have been written years and years before, or even a short period before, and actually supporting those individuals, working with families to be able to come to an agreement of what that might look like. And that is not easy, because children that are placed for adoption do experience trauma, and we know that some children aren't placed together in families because of the individual experiences of trauma and how that plays out. But that doesn't mean that there isn't ways that those connections can still be maintained for those families, at whatever level or whatever way that suits those children, because ultimately it's what benefits the child, and that's what we're trying to work towards. And adults having a trusting relationship, like Jill's sons and daughter, they started like writing letters and building that relationship up. That's such a natural way. Your daughter games with her brother. It's relationship-based practice. It's a natural way of building relationships. It's not, okay, let's go face to face from day one. It's build up, go slow. I think that's a really important message as well.
No, I think I absolutely agree. I think we need a system that's tailored to the individual needs of each child and that wider family, rather than it be, well, okay, the adoption's happened now, so the next step is letterbox, and that being the automatic next step. And I think it's brilliant that we're really starting to see a real shift, not just in culture, but in the language we're using about families and the way that we are just the way that we're seeing families. I think that, you know, especially for those of us on this call, you know, for a very long time, our voices weren't even part of National Adoption Week because we were very much seen as part of the problem, whereas actually we're now being seen as part of the solution. And there now seems to be a really comprehensive understanding that we all have a role to play in our children's lives. And there are, you know, even if we are not able to be in their lives directly, we have things that we can contribute. And I always used to say, how was it harming my son to tell him I loved him and I missed him? Surely that was better for him to know that than it were for him to grow thinking that I didn't love him and I didn't miss him. And I think there's something I wanted to just very quickly mention that I didn't earlier, which is when my son originally contacted the local authority and was told, no, she's a risk, go away. I think something that I didn't mention is what really concerned me more about that was, what if I actually had been a risk? He wasn't given any of the information he needed to understand that. He wasn't given any support around that. And obviously then went to find me himself online. And, you know, it was that sort of really understanding that the more information we can give children, the safer we make them, and we empower them to be able to make safe decisions, rather than just saying that person is a risk and expecting them to, you know, we all know you tell a teenager not to do something, you may as well be telling them to do the exact opposite. So it's about that really accepting that this is that child's life and they have a right to know this information, rather than making a decision for them. And there was just one little thing I wanted to mention before we moved on, and because I just realized we were talking about tips for adopters about supporting those sibling relationships, because I wholeheartedly understand that this entire journey to reunification has been incredibly difficult for my son's other mom. This has been, you know, she's had to manage this on her own. She hasn't been supported with any of this, but she's understood that it's important to do so. And one of the things that she did throughout Letterbox, and I think she's continued to do, was to try and build something of a relationship with me. However difficult that was for her, she used to send me what I called the mum letter. So I'd get the normal letter from my children, which, as anyone who has children will know, getting them to write a letter is damn near impossible, even if they're writing to Santa. So you'd only get little bits of what was going on. But the mum letter used to tell me what I really needed to know, which meant that I was then able to pass that information to my daughter, which meant she was then able to build that connection to her brother, because I had the information to be able to share with her in an age appropriate way. So I think there's a lot to be said there around this real information sharing and understanding that the more information everybody around that child has, the better place they are to be able to help them build relationships with one another and to help them understand what's going on.
No, and I'd agree with that completely around that building that trusting relationship between adults, because that will only benefit the children. And I think what I would want to say from that professional perspective is, through the work, through the culture change and working with the regional adoption agencies and voluntary adoption agencies and independent individuals, and hearts and minds are here for this. And I think it's a lot of the barriers that we come up against is that systemic issue around resources. And we know there, as you said then, Angela, there needs to be a lot of support potentially for families to be able to come to a point where they can have reunification. And I think from that professional perspective is that there is movement within making individual plans for children, supporting families. I just don't think we're quite there yet in the sense of being able to do that consistently.
Thank you so much, Vicky. That's, as I say, it's incredibly helpful. I think what is also really great is that it doesn't matter whether we're talking about our lived experience or our professional experience, we're all saying the same things. This is about children and relationships and building bonds and creating an environment for that to be able to be done safely. And you're right, it's the support. The support is really the thing that makes it. And I mean, in my case, I can't understate the importance, or overstate, sorry, the importance that that post-adoption support meant for me, because if it wasn't for that support, I don't know how I would have found the strength to carry on. The stigma and the shame that we're left with as birth families can be really all-consuming, and we're often left with absolutely no idea where to turn. And at Family Rights Group, we're really trying to work hard to change that. So I'm now delighted to welcome my colleagues Beverly and Anne Harrod, and together with my amazing fellow panel member and birth mum Sammy, who are going to be sharing some of the work that we're doing around supporting birth families and the difference that that support makes to families impacted by adoption. While we're waiting for the slides, do you guys just want to introduce yourselves and who you are, and then we can bring the slides up when they come? And Harrod, you go first.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Anhara Davis, and I'm Social Work Advisor at Family Rights Group.
Thank you. Beverly?
Hi, I'm sorry, I've got a cold. My name is Beverly Campbell, and I have two jobs. One is as an advisor for the advice line, but my main job that takes up the majority of the week is the really exciting one, because I'm the Family Participation Officer at Family Rights, which means that I have the privilege and the pleasure of supporting the panel members. And we have two panels. One is the parents panel that both Angela and Sammy are members of, and the other one is the kinship carers panel. And then we have our lovely Sammy.
Go on, Sammy.
I'm Sammy, and I'm a birth mum to a little girl who's 11.
Just to repeat, my name is Anhara Davis. I'm a Social Work Advisor at Family Rights Group. I'm going to start this little bit by just introducing you to our birth family support map, and then I'm going to hand over to Sammy, who, as you know, is part of our Family Rights Group parents panel, and Beverly, who we've already met, who many of you will already know as our Families Participation Officer. So, to explain, our birth family support map went live on our Family Rights Group website a few months ago. What we're talking about is a map that sets out key information and details about all the different services and places in England that give support and information to birth family members affected by adoption. We know from people contacting our advice service at Family Rights Group and from discussions within our panels that adoption information and support for birth families can be really patchy. It can be really hard to find out what services are available where, how to access those services, and which family members those services provide support for. So, in collaboration with members of our parents panel and with funding from Adoption England via Vicky, we decided to try and create a searchable map of these services so that birth family members and relatives, including siblings, can easily search to see what support is available to them wherever they are in England. So that birth family support map is now live on our website. I think I was going to direct you all to the QR code on the slides. Let's change that plan. I'm going to direct you all to the chat where the link, I've just posted the web link to the birth family support map. So I would really encourage you at this point just to click on that if you can, or if for whatever reason you can't see the chat, I'll just tell you that the website, if you manage to catch this quickly, is www.frg.org.uk/birth-families-map. If you can, please feel free to have a look at this map right now. And what I'll do is just carry on chatting about some of the key features of the map as you look at it. So creating this map meant that we first had to try and find out what services are actually out there. There is no existing list or database of services for us to consult. So we carried out a 4-month-long search for the different kinds of services in England that provide support and/or information for birth families affected by adoption. We are talking about everything from big organisations that provide a national helpline service to much smaller local services that provide support to families in specific areas only. During that 4-month-long search period, we found over 80 support services for birth families in England. And key details about those services are all included and set out in the map that I hope you are now looking at. When you go on the map, you'll see that services are searchable by postcode or local authority. And then once you've searched for services in your area by your postcode or local authority, you can then filter the results of those services so that you can narrow them down to the ones that are relevant for you. So for example, there's one filter that's about who the support is for. So you can put down that you are a mum looking for support, a dad looking for support, or a sibling looking for support. Or you can also filter the results according to what kind of support you're looking for, because this is a broad range of different support. So are you looking for legal information? Are you looking for peer support groups? Are you looking for help with contact? Are you looking for therapeutic support? There's a lot of, this category of support can consist of many different things. So you can also filter that down that way. And then you can also filter by what stage the adoption is in. So for example, are you looking for support in situations where adoption is just being considered, or when adoption is being planned, or when the adoption has already taken place? You can then click at the results to see the services available. On those separate service pages, we've done our best to include key details that people really need to know. So for example, what format is the support available? How do you get referred to the service if that's relevant? Like how long, how much support is available? Is it just one session, or is it open-ended? And we've also included information about whether the service is able to provide support for young people and children under 18. Now, I think this is the point when I need to highlight what many of you will already know, which is that there are areas where services like these are really limited. And I think that's one of the key things that really came through clearly to us in this process of gathering details of all the services that we knew. When we're creating this map, our main priority was making sure that we were creating something easy to use and effective. And family members affected by adoption from our panels were involved throughout to make sure we were getting it right. I am very conscious that many of those panel members are here today. So hello, and just a huge thank you again to you for your contribution. We also consulted with a range of different practitioners who work with families, right from when we were searching for where these services are in the country, to what we should include in the map, right through to road testing the map and piloting it before it went live. Another essential factor for us was making sure that the map is as up to date as possible. Services seem to change all the time, so we will be updating and checking the details of the services that we've included in the map every year for the next 2 years, because we need to be sure that the map and the details in the map are as correct as we can possibly have them. I can see that we've got slides, hooray. I think we probably just need to shift straight onto the third slide, if that's okay. So I think there's a second slide and a third slide, and I will just carry on whilst hopefully that happens. So I think we can honestly say that we've had a really positive response and some really useful feedback so far since we launched. But really, I just want to make a plea for help for everyone here. Can I ask you to please share information about the map with the people that you know and in places that you know? Creating this map of support services for birth family members, creating the map is in some ways the easy bit. The hard bit is making sure that the people who would find it useful know that it's there. So we have our comms campaign at Family Rights Group, but can I please ask you to also share it within your networks? And if you know of places that you think it would be helpful for me to share or for us to share it at Family Rights Group, then my email address is on the slides, and if not, I'll put it in the chat. So let me know by email. And second, can I ask you to let me know if you know of services in your area that aren't actually included in the map yet, so that we can get in touch with them and let them know about the map and ask for their key details. So just those two things would be great. And I think that is probably it from me for now. As I said earlier, I want to introduce you and pass you on to Sammy, one of the mothers on our parents panel who helped create and review this map. Sammy is going to tell us her perspective on the map in conversation with my absolutely lovely colleague, Beverly Campbell, who is Families Participation Officer at Family Rights Group. Over to you.
Hi, I'm sorry, I've got a cold. Sammy, you have been a member of Family Rights Group Parents Panel for several years. Can you tell me what that's been like for you in general?
That's been good to get my voice out, and so that other birth parents would like to contribute to this type of work, as we're not really seeing our head, we're basically just left in the background, and that support has helped me with a really lot of stuff around my daughter's adoption and how I see things.
Thank you. So as a member of the Parents Panel, do you think it was important that we worked with those with lived experience and asked them to get involved with the creation of the map from the very beginning?
Yes, I feel it was very important to be asked to be involved and for other birth parents to be involved too. And that won't just, maybe not so much just mums, some birth dads too. As we are the ones with lived experience, we're the ones that can give you that information on maybe the reasons why we haven't found that support, or the reasons maybe around why we wouldn't want to maybe go via an agency to find that support due to experiences with social workers and courts and general life around adoption.
And during that lengthy process when we were working on the map, do you think that we gave you positive feedback about your contributions and your comments?
Yeah, I felt like the feedback was how it should be, and everything seemed easy to use, and was asked if we felt there were certain things we wanted to say or certain information we wanted to give people. I felt like that was really, really there and in the heart of that. Usually we're not heard.
And before everybody else saw the map, before it was launched, did you and the other parents have an opportunity to go through the map, and how did you personally find it?
Yeah, we had a run through before it went live. I was using my mobile phone, so I wasn't able to click on the map for my local authority. I had to use my postcode. But then we let everyone know what issues we was having. And then I tried it the next day on my laptop and it worked perfectly well.
Yes, because I remember it was you and several other people had that. And so Anne Harrod was able to contact the relevant bodies and they corrected that very quickly. At the time, we thought it was going to be a major issue, but they said no,
Yeah.
it was fine and it was sorted, which was really good, because if you hadn't tried it or you hadn't been able to tell us this doesn't work properly, that would have probably remained there without being notified. Now, with everything that you've seen on the map during this process, do you think it's an important resource for families?
Yeah, I think it's a massive thing for families to have. Whether that's whatever part of the adoption triangle you're in with, but from my experience, a birth parent, because we just get left aside once that adoption order's gone through. We don't belong anymore, do we? All our rights are severed. Obviously we have letterbox, but not everyone gets that. But whereas with this map, there's other resources that you can contact in your area to get support and stuff like that. So yeah, I do feel it's been a massive thing to be out there, and not all parents are able to do that. So
And I do think it's important to say, because of the theme of today being sibling contact, even though that's not relevant in your case, you've actually recognised how important it is for all the different aspects of birth family inquiries to be dealt with in the map.
yeah, it's definitely a big thing to have for other people who are linked to adoption, not just birth parents, and for them to know where they can access support to help the children, or whether that's adopted children they have at home. Obviously in my case, not siblings, but my mum and dad didn't get no support, and obviously I have letterbox too. So it was nice that if they wanted to look at that, they could, well, just for themselves, and have separate support from anything that I can support them with, or anything I could link them to or anything.
And at the end of Anne Harrod's presentation, she asked if everybody could promote the service and tell people about it. You've already started, haven't you?
Yes, I've a couple of people who I follow on some social media sites had posted something and was looking for support. So I told them about the mapping tool, and one lady got back to me, and she is now receiving letterbox, and she's now receiving some support. And actually, that is PAC-UK that I was supporting her. So that was nice that she got back to me, and I was able to share that link, which felt really nice. I was already aware of what would be available in my area, as my city's not got a lot of support here for anyone affected by adoption. But if you're in a bigger place that has lots of different links, the lady actually told me I think there was about 4 or 5 different places she could have gone to find the support. And she told me that PAC was one of them. And then I told her, obviously, I have some support through them. So that's why she picked, I think that's why she picked what she picked. And obviously, Family Rights Group invented the tool. So I think she's also contacted you guys for some advice on certain things as well.
Well, from a professional point of view, but more so in regards to you, a personal point of view, I am so glad that you were willing to work with us. You brought so much information, insight, and feeling into this work, but also it's just wonderful to see that we can provide support to those with lived experience so that they can feel that they can change things. And yourself and the other parents that have worked with us on this has made such a major change, Sammy. So on behalf of FRG, I'd like to say we couldn't have done it without you.
And I'd like to thank you all for giving me that opportunity, and especially Angela, as she introduced me to you, and I wouldn't have been where I am today without her linking me to Family Rights Group. So I want to thank you all too.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much, guys. And you're very welcome, Sammy. And as everybody on this call will know, I will merrily poach people from wherever I can to get you to come and join our panels, because I think what this proves is just what we can achieve when we all work together. And I would actually like to point out that at the beginning of that, Anne Harrod made this piece of work sound easy, but I can tell you the level of work that went into designing this was phenomenal. So to all of the other staff in the background who helped us to put this tool together, simply because they knew that it was something that was needed, I would like to say thank you. And I think it's a fantastic example of co-production in its truest form. And as Sammy just shared there, the end result speaks for itself, because it's already out there and it's already helping people who would otherwise be isolated and unsupported to access the support that is hopefully going to help them to remain a part of their child's life, which in turn is going to help benefit the child. So thank you, guys. And last but by no means least, I would like to very briefly welcome Andy. I have managed to persuade him to speak even for a short time, because the perspectives and voices of birth fathers is one that we just don't hear often enough. They are regularly overlooked during proceedings and after proceedings. And Andy and other fathers have contributed to this session. And whilst you may not be sharing a huge amount today, Andy, you've been an integral part of the team getting this event up and running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to introduce the next section, just so that we can see your lovely paint-free face.
Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm a birth dad of a 15-year-old who was adopted at 3, and I have 2 other children at home with no social involvement, and I'm here today to introduce the video of fathers' perspectives of sibling relationships. So if you'd like to roll the video.
So from a dad's perspective, how important is it that siblings are able to have a relationship in adoption, and how has this impacted you?
It's very important.
Yeah.
Because it's family. It's like years later you find out that I've got them, I've got a sister. Why are they not for found out all these missing years? Why does it not happen at the moment? Because I'm in a unique situation. I've got 7 kids. 3 older, 1 I don't see, 3 younger is adoption. The younger ones can see each other because they don't have contact with me. The older ones want to see the younger ones, but can't because they're in contact with me. But they're missing out. I just want all my kids to see each other and stay out of the equation. Why can't that be possible? Why can't that work?
How important would that be to you to know that all your children were having a relationship with each other?
Very important. Part of who they are, their makeup. Yeah, they may have different mums, different dads, but they're all the same family.
Yeah, it's very important because I'm going through it now with my daughter. She's 11. She's wanting contact with her adopted sister, so she is wanting contact with her. So it's important because now it's causing mental health issues, possibly just on my side with my daughter, but it could be also on the adoption side as well. So we need to take this to the next step and make sure that sibling contact is recommended at the highest level possible.
How could your views about sibling contact and relationships be heard by social workers, do you think, where there is a plan of adoption?
Well, we were speaking about it before, weren't we? Whether you've got a child that's going into adoption and there's no other siblings involved at that moment in time, in my case, they have to look at it that I've had two other children later on, and they need to think that in future, if this is the case, then we need to look at that as a possibility. Yours might be a little different because you've got older kids and opposite way round to me. So yeah, I think that we need to look at contact between siblings more at the start for already existing siblings and future siblings. Yeah,
future siblings.
Because it'll have impact when we come to tell our children that they have an older sibling that's been adopted. They want to know the reasons why, they want everything of what's gone on. And when that moment comes that they want contact, and what do we say? No, you can't. So it's something that needs to be considered from the start. So
otherwise, you end up with a situation you've got missing years. Why did not see the kids earlier? Why did not see the brother? Why not see the sister?
Missing years. That's really
events, birthdays.
Yeah.
Social, yeah. Weddings.
And it's difficult to see your own kids at home struggling, knowing that they want contact with their adopted sibling. So
at the point of the adoption plan, were your views about siblings and relationships and maintaining relationships taken into any kind of consideration? Did you feel that you had a voice in that process?
I'm not smarty enough.
I didn't. The only thing that was considered was that I had contact, and it was twice a year. I had a child that was 6 months old at the time, and they still didn't take that into consideration for the future, which is the reason why I say.
So for your child wasn't included in that post-adoption contact planning,
no.
Even though that it was a sibling?
Yeah, that's it. They just never considered. And with my adoption, it was more to the point of, it all started off in court that I was going for contact. It was then changed by the social workers to adoption, and I still, at that point, weren't considered to be a full-time parent. But what can I do about that? I did everything that I could possibly do it, but my views weren't considered at the time. I still don't think they are now.
Adoption hasn't worked for my children. They went to adoptees, lasted 2 months and came back. I haven't seen them. I'm still entitled to go and see them. It's the contact centre. I'm just not getting heard that when there were the foster carers, I was seeing them in contact centre, but now there's back with the foster carers, I can't see them again.
So what is communication like then, do you think, at the moment with?
You message a social worker, nothing comes back.
How does that impact you when you're not getting those responses to those calls or those emails, those messages?
You just no answers. You get more and more questions and less answers, if any answers. And it's so frustrating because it's still your kids and you're missing out on time again. Birthdays, Christmas and happy occasions.
How could social workers include dads more, do you think? What would you like to see?
Need to treat both parents
equally,
50-50, equally.
And dads are just as important.
We are. That's the thing, and
everyone has a dad.
We love our child as much as the mother loves the child. At the end of the day, we will do what we can to protect our children, and we don't get that same respect from the social workers as what birth mothers do. So as long as it's equal and they listen to dads more, then I think we'll have a better process.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you to everyone who has shared today, because just like that, as if by magic, we're suddenly out of time. And I'm sure that you can all agree we could have continued these conversations all day. There's so much to share, there's so much to learn. But for me, the key points I think I'm going to take away are the need for post-adoption support. I believe it should be an automatic right for all impacted, but especially for siblings, that it should be tailored to individual families' needs, and it should be there for as long as it's needed and regularly reviewed. And that relationships should, wherever safe to do so, be valued, maintained and strengthened, especially sibling relationships. And Emma, is there anything you wanted to come in with just before I finally close?
Just a massive thank you to everyone. I think, each year I'm blown away and I learn something new from my own practice as well. And it's just been phenomenal just to listen to everyone today and be part of that. And just to really, take away some of these key issues that, siblings, the relationship that siblings have can often outlive that of a parental relationship. These are forever families, aren't they? And that's what the theme has been today. And it's just really important that we emphasize that. And it's just been a real privilege. So thank you.
Thanks, Emma. And I echo that. Huge thank you to everyone. Thank you to PAC again for giving us this voice, for giving us this platform to share our experiences and to be heard. To Family Rights Group for doing everything that they can, again, to give us a voice, a platform, and for sharing with us the tool today that will hopefully help so many more families access support and hopefully find themselves in a better place than they are now. But my biggest thanks is to all of our presenters today for sharing what is incredibly difficult, but special thanks to the siblings whose contributions were absolutely vital in helping us understand the impact decisions made about them have on them. They have no choice, no control, but they do have a voice. And I'm forever grateful that they chose to share that voice with us today. And looking from my own experiences, no matter what the system does to prevent relationships from thriving, love will always find a way. Let's just do everything we can to give it a helping hand. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and recording of this will be available on PAC's YouTube page in the future. Take care.